Welcome to the Economy and Politics Show. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition will discuss the key takeaways from the recent launch of the second Tier 1 Banks report by Proshare, a specialized financial information hall. On Friday, the 13th of October 2023, at the Emmanuel Ijewere Hall of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, Proshare launched an incisive report titled Reassessing Tier 1 Banks, a New Class of 2023. So today we'll be discussing that report, and with me on the show is Mr. Tosin Ige, Head Research Services of Proshare. Nice to have you, Tosin.
Thank you for having me.
And I must say that you did a lovely presentation on the macroeconomic review and outlook at the event.
Thank you.
So let's first begin with the report and look at the issues around the Proshare Bank Strength Index. That's become a talking point in banking assessment and Tier 1. Just share some insight into that PBSI and how it's changed the assessment of Tier 1 banks.
All right. Thank you for having me once again. But I think the assessment itself came about because of the changes that we've seen from the bank. So the metrics doesn't just come about. There's first an evolution in the banking industry that, of course, brought this about, because the extant classification of bank is rather arbitrary, if I can use that word. And so we, as a watchdog in the industry, we decide to bridge that gap by actually standardizing the metrics. And of course, from our maiden edition, you're aware of that report that had, there was those metrics that we actually use, quite similar to what AfriInvest did in 2013. And but of course, from that report, we had inputs, and we also assessed the limitations ourselves. And so that's why this current report now came about with a more expansive and standardized metrics that, of course, covers different aspects or issues, factors that actually affect the banking industry. So we see the introduction of the efficiency metrics, profitability, and then we also, deepen the risk metrics, and also e-banking income. So that's why it's more expanded and standardized now. So rather than using that arbitrariness, what we're saying is that let's have an industry-weighted metrics. So, and of course, and also not limited to some components or some metrics, some issues in the bank. Let's look at an expanded performance metrics of all the banks. And so when you're now saying a Tier 1 bank, you really know that in all aspects of it, they are actually Tier 1 banks. So that's what the PBSI, as the name suggests, Proshare Bank Strength Index, seems to suggest.
So from the second edition of the Tier 1 Banks report, it showed that 4 Tier 1 banks and financial holding companies retained their positions, while 2 dropped to the Tier 2 level. Can you speak further on that?
All right. I think you're talking about the H1 2023, and then I must say that the H1 was done to preempt the performance of the bank for the full year end 2023. Now, that was done because the reports came towards the end of the year, and then a number of these banks have released their H1, their first half 2023 results. So that's why we did that, and we see truly 4 from those who were there in the full year end 2022 retaining their position, and then some dropping, and then some will see some entry. But for the focus is actually on the full year end 2022. And then for that, we'll see the likes of Access, UBA, Zenith, Stanbic, GT making the list. And of course, FBNH also making the list, while Fidelity and ETI were not part of it. Now, ETI actually wasn't there in full year in 2021. So they still didn't enter that ranking in full year 2022. But Fidelity was there in 2021, and of course they were out of the ranking in 2022. Now, this is not to say that they didn't do well, really. And I must say that they did well compared to 2021. But of course, as I said, there is a redistribution of the weight and the metrics that was used. So the addition of some additional indicators means that there will be that redistribution of the weights of the metrics. And so even if you are done well in, let's say, the capital adequacy ratio in full year 2021, with the addition of cost of risks, you also have to weigh that you do well in cost of risk also, and of course profitability, all of this. So because of the weight, we see some of them are dropping out, but it's not to say they didn't do well. So that's why we put some of them like that on the watch list, the likes of Fidelity and ETI, because they really did well. So that's what the metrics came about for this year. Access, UBA, Zenith, GT, FBN. Those are the 6 that make the list.
So we just hope that when we do the 3rd edition, we'll see the full year 2023 and know how it goes now. So risk management is a very, very critical part of this whole report and sustainability of banks. Can you just give us 1 or 2 insights into how risk management is playing its way and, of course, efficiency?
Okay. Truly, risk is a major consideration, and I think you're part of the launch of the report. You see that one of the key issues that dominates discussions during the launch is the risk, because there are external risks and of course there are internal risks. When you consider the banking crisis across the globe, talking about the SVB and now the Silvergate, the likes of them, it's also the risk. Yes, it's the ALM risk, so that duration risk. Some of them invested in long-dated treasury bond and of course mortgage bank security, and they didn't have so much of them to back it up. So when you invest on that, there's that mismatch between the asset and the liability of the bank. So that kind of creates that risk for them, especially the liquidity challenge for them. And when the depositors ask for their money, so they couldn't buy that out. So that is one risk. And of course, there's also the geopolitical risk across the globe, which of course is fueling the inflationary pressure, and because of that we see the CBN, the central bank across the globe, raising rates. So that is also another risk factors for the bank, and that's why in our report we actually had to put risk as a major metrics there. And then so to capture that, we actually put the CAR, which of course measures the absorptive capacity of bank to weather any losses in that instance. And again, we also put the cost of risk, which of course measure the COR. Yes, the COR measure the risk of the bank against the assets that they are taking up. So that's why it's an important metrics, and so depending on the way banks perform, also they also feed into their score in the report.
Yeah, quite remarkable. Now, from the macroeconomic perspective, and the fact that we are in the era of the Basel III regulations, there's need for banks to really, really pull their effect in Nigeria. And we're looking at the issue of recapitalization. Do you see that happening more in 2024, particularly at a time where this issue of capital and liquidity, very key issues for Nigerian banks?
Yes, we've also advocated at Proshare, we've also advocated for the recapitalization of bank. And 2 things, when you look at the Naira component of the current capitalization, I think about 25 billion Naira, it's not so much sufficient to actually finance big projects, as it were. So that's why many mega projects. So that's why many of those mega projects is often done as a consortium of banks. So that value to finance that's capital requirement is really not strong enough for bank as of this period. And I must say again, the last time we checked, many of those banks are not even meeting up with that requirement. So that's the Naira component of it. But again, when you look on the flip side, when it was set at that 25 billion, it was actually an equivalent of the dollar component of it. I think about 250,000 then thereabout. So, and when you consider that value now is exchange rate has depreciated. So that FX depreciation has actually eroded the dollar value of that current capitalization. So even if we want to still use the 250,000 to gauge the naira value of it, maybe. So let's just find a way around it so that our banks are really strong in terms of first meeting their maybe capital project, financing the real sector that we're trying to work around in the nation, the industrialization, because your bank needs to be prepared for those industrialization. And again, even external financing may be an issue if we do not have enough capital. So that's why we have also been an advocate of recapitalization of the banks.
Now, Tosin, you're part of this report. What's the best part of this report as we wrap up? I mean, what excites you about this report?
Yeah, I think what excites me about this report is actually that it's rigorous. I must say it's rigorous because it's a business research that's also scientific, in the sense that we didn't bring arbitrariness into the report. Everything is detailed, all metrics are scrutinized. So because of that rigor of coming out with those metrics, because again, as I said, we've engaged operators, the CFOs of bank, and when you're listening to what the banks are facing, and you have to now use it in the report as part of the input to the report, so that really you are not working in isolations. The banks and of course the industry and the analysts are in synchronizations to provide that weight for those we really call the big banks in the system. So that's the high point for me in the report. Nothing is arbitrary about it. It's rigorous, and that's why the interventions and what it has also been creating in the system is that big.
Rigorous, but at least it's worth it, and we're seeing the impact it's already making in the banking industry and financial services sector. Thank you very much, Mr. Tosin Ige, for this time. Thank you. And that was Mr. Tosin Ige, Head Research Services of Proshare, speaking to us about the second edition of the Tier 1 Banks report titled Reassessing Tier 1 Banks, a New Class of 2023. And that will be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics show. If you want to read about these reports, you can log on to our website, displayed on the screen, to read a lot about these reports. Also, we have a video of the launch of this event that happened last week. You can follow us on WebTV also to get that information. Just to let you know that anytime we have this conversation around economy and politics, it's all to keep you informed and make you understand the dynamics of how economy, politics affects our lives and society. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching. My name is Ottoabasi Abasiekong, and bye for now.